Welcome on to the next episode of Down. We are talking Comrades Marathon as we continue to build up to race day in 2025. There's a big weekend of running, particularly down in Cape Town. My name is Brad Nadalt. We've got the coach Lindsey Parry with us. Lindsey, I ran Bay to Bay this weekend and I've forgotten how big Suikerbos is. I did it on my bicycle about 2 weeks before race day. That hill is a monster, absolute monster. And the funny thing is I was looking at the gradient and the length of it, and it's funnily enough, very similar to Polly Shorts on the uprun. So I'm glad we're not doing an uprun in 2025. But geez, that hill is an absolute beast.
And you've done a few more kilometers by the time you get to Polly Shorts than you have on Bay to Bay, Brad. So
thanks for reminding me. I'm
trying not
to think of that. Definitely not trying to think of that. And the good news is the view's slightly better at the top of Suikerbos than when you get to the top of Polly Shorts. That's for sure. Absolutely. All right. Today we are going to be talking about recovery, the importance thereof, and also some injury prevention. And that will lead us nicely into what we spoke about last week. We were going to talk about this week, which is strength training and the importance, particularly for the down run. Lindsey, let's talk about some recovery. And one of the things you spoke about last week is making sure that you don't, especially if you're a marginal qualifier and if you mess it up and you've got to go again, and how it impacts your training because you're not recovering properly. And I think a lot of people, it took me so long. I mean, I've been working with you for well over a decade now, and maybe I'm just a slow learner, I don't know, but it took me so long for the penny to drop on this actually, is what the role of recovery is in your training. It's not just a rest day, it's your body actually is getting stronger during recovery, and that's how you benefit from the training you're actually doing. So let's talk a little bit about sort of the importance of recovery and then best practices when it comes to making sure you recover properly from all your runs.
Yeah, so Brad, you're not the coach, but your saying is actually what really sums it up, is that you cannot benefit from the training that you don't recover from. And so that is really key, is that most people don't understand that the improvement only comes when you recover. While we are training, we essentially create a load, or more accurately, a slight overload, so that we cause a systemic, so a physiological failure, and or some low key physical failure or damage. Damage is a better word to use when it comes to the physical. So when we do the slight overload, there is damage to muscle tissues, bones, joints, ligaments. But also on a cellular level, there's like this failure to meet the demand. So that's really what it is. We call it a slow progressive overload. So we are trying to slowly but surely increase the load that your body is able to handle. And to do that, we have to very gradually just keep overloading the system. And in response to that overload, during the downtime or recovery periods in between the exercises, that's when the body gets to work. So it'll repair muscles, tendons, ligaments, but it'll go, okay, fixed up, but I want to be able to do that task or handle that task better next time. So now we actually make tendons and ligaments a little bit thicker. We make muscles a little bit stronger, increase the muscle fiber density, etc., things like that. Then on a physiological level, we're like, we didn't quite get enough energy to manage that task. So we had to get to a point where we were rotating fewer and fewer muscle fibers to get that task done. So how can we improve that energy delivery? And then the body makes a whole lot of changes to improve us cardiovascularly and to make us stronger, more efficient, and faster. So that's really what's happening during the recovery period. And that's why we spread workouts out the way that we do, so that we try and keep gaps between the hard runs and the long runs. Hard runs, long runs. We try and space those out evenly through the week, so that when you're doing the very easy runs, some recovery, active recovery can actually be taking place through the week. And then importantly, that is why we then throw in recovery weeks, so actual weeks where we just drop the training down below what we know that you can handle, so that we don't take to the body to the point of failure again. We actually do the training underneath that, so no more damage is done. And during that period, that's when the body can really shore itself up for the next round of the 4 weeks of training. And then when we do races or new things that we haven't done before or haven't done for a long time, you haven't done Bay to Bay for a really long time, as an example, So what that's going to mean is that at bay to bay, there's going to be a large amount of damage that's done. If it's the first time you've ever run 30 kilometers, you're going to do huge damage. And so afterwards, we need to give the body a little bit longer than you normally would to make sure that that process is completed and that we do recover fully. Because if we allow ourselves to recover fully, we'll lose a teeny bit of fitness, but we will gain huge amounts in terms of our body's ability to handle the next round of training. And so that's literally why recovery is so important.
All right, cool. And so we know it's important now. Let's talk about some strategies to maximize it. Like what are some things that we can do to improve how fast we recover, how we, not just how fast, but also like improvement. So how do we improve our recovery?
Yeah, so look, we are gonna go through this again, particularly when we get into the peak training weeks, because to improve our recovery also does require some extra discipline. And so that in itself can also add to this general mental fatigue that builds up with comrades from being disciplined all of the time. So we'll go through some things now. We'll go through them again, just as reminders of what we can do. So probably the two cornerstones of recovery, or the two most important things outside of what I've already spoken about, which is to make sure we space workouts apart properly, that we give ourselves recovery weeks. And then what I did forget to say, Brad, is that we also have a proper rest day or recovery day in each 7-day cycle. So I find that's quite important, both from a physical and mental point of view, that you have a day where you're not worrying about strength training, you're not worrying about squeezing in a session. So you really do have a day where you're not running your life around running. It's quite important. But what's very important in that day too is that that is a day that really allows the body to regenerate really well. The other time the body regenerates is during sleep. So we must prioritize sleep, particularly as the training gets harder. And so I typically try and encourage people again from March into the middle of May in particular. So that's a good 8 to 10 week block where I just say, listen, prioritize your sleep. Aim to get to bed 30 to 40 to an hour earlier than you normally do. We are waking up incredibly early, most of us, to get in all this training. So just giving yourself that little bit of extra sleep is going to make an enormous difference, because that is when we regenerate. And then secondly is nutrition. And it's just to be mindful. Nutrition is literally a minefield. So there's just so many things, and it would literally take hours to go through all of it. But I like to just really stick to a couple of basics. And that is that, number one, we want to fuel for exercise, and we want to fuel to recover from exercise. So those are kind of the two blocks that I primarily like to focus on. And fueling for exercise involves making sure that we've got enough energy to do the exercise that we're going to do. So then that means that we need to follow a fairly healthy diet, focusing mostly on things that you can prepare yourself, but ensuring that there are enough carbohydrates in there to give you the energy that you need to do the exercise. So if you are a low carb or high protein or high fat or one of these diets, then what that means is that during exercise, you need to fuel with carbohydrates, because they are important in fueling performance. Okay, there's some evidence that fat adapted athletes can do very well in very long distance events, but even at Comrades, where the terrain is varying so much, you've got to do some really tough uphill sections. Eventually the downhill eccentric load becomes quite high. Carbohydrates are still very important for performing well on race day. So either going to fuel for or in that exercise. Okay. And then the other is when we come out of exercise, and that's providing the building blocks for repairing the damage. So again, there will be an important component there in terms of reloading muscle glycogen. So we want to take in carbohydrates immediately after exercise, within 30 to 45 minutes of exercise. providing some proteins helps facilitate the uptake, and it does kickstart the process of repairing muscles, but it's not critical that we get in lots of protein in that window. Then for the rest of the day between exercise, we want to, as part of our fueling for exercise, make sure that you're getting adequate protein so that your body can rebuild itself through the day. So those are your two cornerstones. We've got rest recovery cycles. We've got sleep and nutrition.
All right, cool. Lindsey, I'm just thinking about it too. Like, obviously, I ran this weekend, but there's lots of marathons happening almost every weekend. I mean, Johnson Crane's coming up this weekend up in Gauteng, which is quite a big marathon that a lot of people use to qualify. Those are the general recovery practices that you want to bake into your training between now and Comrades Race Day. But let's talk quickly about recovery post a marathon effort. Like, if you are running a marathon this coming weekend, as an example, what should you be doing the week after or 2 weeks after?
Yeah. So in terms of some specific ideas, immediately afterwards to help speed up recovery, again, same sort of thing applies. High carbohydrate drink with some proteins in it. You know, something like a chocolate milk is basically as good as you can get. Of course, you can. There's loads of products on the market that you can also use, but immediately 30 to 45 minutes after qualifying or doing a huge race, before you reach for that beer, get in some form of recovery drink. And as I said, chocolate milk is just such a classic, and it's really good for all the reasons stated. And then just make sure that you fuel well during that day, because that's hard to do after a hard race. We typically don't feel so amazing, and because we've probably been taking in quite a bit of sugar too, that does irritate the gut a bit. But just try and make sure that you get in some decent, high quality foods on that day. Then things like ice baths, wearing compression socks, or getting into compression boots. You're in Cape Town, Brad. So what would have worked amazingly is if you cruised down to Sea Point on your way home, climbed into one of the tidal pools there, and really just had a nice soak in that ice bath. But then the important stuff is, okay, how sore are my legs? When is my peak day of pain? If your peak day of pain is one day after the race and then you start to get better, you didn't do a lot of damage, and you can pick up some easy running probably from the Wednesday or Thursday without compromise. I wouldn't leap straight into hard training, but it does mean that next Monday you will probably be able to get back into training. If peak day is number 2, then you've got what we would call normal DOMs. In other words, you've properly overdone it, but you are still going to recover reasonably quickly, and I would be running by the weekend in that scenario. And then again, I'd still probably be fine with getting back into full training from the Monday. If you peak at day 3 or 4, which is typically Comrades soreness or the best marathon you've ever run in your life sometimes, then you've properly ruined yourself, and you need 2 weeks to recover properly from that. So week 1 will be very little exercise. Some swimming, some walking might be okay, but you definitely don't want to be running. And then in week 2, you can again swim, cycle, get on the elliptical if you've got access to a gym, some very gentle mobility exercises rather than strength training. And then you would start training again in week 2.
All right, cool. That is brilliant. Lindsey, before we get into injury prevention, I'm just actually looking at the notes who it was. Sandile Ndlovu, that's who it was. Sandile Ndlovu shared a link to the last podcast on an Instagram story and tagged us on Insta as well. So Sandile, what we're going to do is we're going to send you a Coach Parry water bottle. So thank you so much for doing that. Really do appreciate it. Lindsey, let's talk about injury prevention. Obviously, we've touched on recovery, but let's talk about injury prevention at this stage in your Comrades training, because staying injury-free is super important. The last few series of these we've done, we talk about the stat and how important it is, but injury prevention is crucial to staying consistent, and recovery ties into that, because if you're training where you haven't recovered properly, you are just setting yourself up. Let's talk about the role of injury prevention in Comrades training. If you're over 50 and want to recover from sessions faster, run pain and injury-free, and improve your endurance, then be sure to join Lindsey and I for our upcoming Faster Beyond 50 Masterclass. In it, we'll show you how we helped a 70-year-old run a 47-minute, 18-second 10K, and how you can take those exact same principles and apply them in your training. Simply scan the QR code that's on screen right now, or click on the link in the description below to save your seat in the training now. We look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah, look, Brad, what we are striving for, and maybe this is a point I really should have made in the last podcast, but what we're striving for is consistency. I did say that January is all about laying the foundation for consistency, but honestly, that's what it's about. So the more consistent you can be, the better your chances are of success. And of course, the threats, or the biggest threat to consistency, injury and illness. So if we can recover properly and look after ourselves and listen to our bodies, then we can stay consistent. So missing Tuesday's session because you're feeling a little bit stiff and sore from maybe Sunday's run that you ran too hard, or because you've never done strength training before, so you're a bit sore from Monday's session. So dropping your hill work and doing an easy run on Tuesday and moving your hills to Thursday, that can make all the difference between having a little bit of discomfort from a reaction to the training to turning that into an injury. Okay, so we really want to make sure that we're recovering from sessions properly and then listen to our bodies. So stiffness is damage. I think that's an important thing to acknowledge, because most people, I ask them, was there any pain? And they don't associate stiffness with pain. They'll go, no pain, just a little bit of stiffness. So I'm like, well, how are you aware of the stiffness? Oh, because it's sore. Well, if it's sore, it's pain. Okay, so there isn't a differentiation there. So when we have stiffness present, we need to modify our training a little bit, because it means we haven't recovered properly. And then, of course, any other non-stiffness related pains, sudden pain during exercise, joint pain in a tendon like the Achilles, which is a very common one. When you feel pain, stop. Okay. If there are alternative forms of exercise like cycling that don't hurt at all, you can substitute those in. But pain must not be ignored. Don't do the typical runner mistake of going, oh, I'm a bit sore, but let me see how I feel 10 minutes into my run. Because it may either feel slightly better, or you think, oh, it's not so bad, I can finish this run, or I'm already on the run, let me just finish it and see how I am afterwards. And that sort of attitude for 2, 3, 4 runs, and then suddenly we're sitting with a chronic injury. So the way to avoid injury is by making sure that we are recovering properly and doing all the things we can to recover properly, but listen to your body. React immediately to signs of stress so that they do not get worse. And then, Brad, a very important one, which we're going to talk about probably for most of the rest of the pod, is strength training, is to help to fortify your body or strengthen it and make it more injury resistant by doing the right strength training. And then, very importantly, that I want to add about strength training is that the strength training is not just about reducing your risk of injury. It is just like a non-negotiable part of training for the Comrades down run. If you do strength training, the last 30 Ks of Comrades will be much more comfortable. If you don't do strength training, besides the risk for injury, the last 30 Ks of Comrades will be much more uncomfortable.
Yeah, Lindsey, I don't quite know how to broach this, because and I'm talking to myself here, and I'm telling you now, and the majority of other runners feel exactly the same way. Is like, we love running, we hate doing strength training. So it becomes like, you talk strength training, it's almost like as a teenager when your parents are moaning about your bedroom being dirty again, you just tune out, you don't even listen. It's just like the teacher from Charlie Brown. You don't hear anything. And this is so important, particularly, as you said, from an injury prevention point of view, and making sure you have a successful Comrades. But let's talk about it. If people are tuning out, then it's on them. But we've got to convey this message, I think. And strength training is crucial. When you talk about strength training, what are you talking about? I mean, we often get it. People go, "Well, I cycle." That's strength training. When you talk strength training, what specifically are you talking about?
No, so strength training, we are talking about resistance training. Okay? So we often also get is Pilates, is yoga. So those are, I would call them highly complementary forms of strength training. And when I say highly complementary, not to your normal training, to your strength training. So highly complementary to your strength training. And of course, if you've done absolutely no strength training ever, then I reckon something like yoga and Pilates is a great place to start, because it's going to make you stiff and sore. And then you'll want to add on some more traditional resistance training to that mix as well. So that's what we're talking about, Brad. Good old resistance training. Now, does that mean you have to go to a gym? No, it doesn't. You can do loads of body weight exercises at home that will do plenty to help you improve your strength. And then as you improve, a couple of small pieces of equipment like resistance bands can be used to really do great strength workouts. I had a call recently with an Italian fellow who comes from a proper strength background, lifting background, but now wants to, be more holistic in his approach to health as he gets older and live longer. And I was like, well, that's awesome. You're at least ticking the one box that the rest of us runners struggle with. So we'll chase you in the gym and you can chase us on the road. And he laughed and said, listen, what I must tell you is, as strong as I am in certain movements, the Coach Perry strength training that I'm doing, I mustn't make the mistake of thinking that it's easy. And I think that's the point that I want to make, is that you can still work quite hard, and in particular work the right muscles for running by doing it in the comfort of your own home.
Yeah, Lindsey, I wanted to just jump in there. You were talking about the Coach Perry strength training. So part of our Comrades Marathon training roadmap on the All Access program and the others, but the All Access specifically, is we live stream strength classes that are running specific. So if you're running Comrades, these strength classes are exactly what you need. You can do them in the comfort of your own home. You just need a couple of resistance bands, maybe a dumbbell or two. But as Lindsey said, when you're starting out, you probably don't even need that equipment to start with. Body weight exercises are more than enough, and they are. Those strength training classes are a game changer. So I'll pop the link into the description of this podcast as well. If you're investing the time, money, and effort to run Comrades, don't skimp on strength training. And our strength coaches are all highly qualified. The technology we use allow them to see you in your living room so they can give you feedback, because also if you're going to put the time in doing the strength training, make sure you're doing the technique right. It's like watching somebody swim. Like, I think if I'm swimming, I feel like I'm Michael Phelps in the pool until I see an actual video of my swimming stroke, and it's nothing like Michael Phelps, that's for sure. And it's the same thing with your strength training. So make sure you're getting bang for your buck when it comes to doing it. Lindsey, how often should we be doing it? And sort of, is it on run days? Is it on non-run days? What's the deal?
Yeah, so look, the ideal to get the optimum advantage, or benefits is the right word, the optimum benefits from strength training, that's 3 days a week. But that really does start to clutter up a week if you're now also trying to get in 3 days a week. And human beings are quite simple. It's like, can I do 3? No. Oh, well, then I won't do any. So while 3 might be the optimal number for getting the improvements we like, 2 is a really good number. And 2 is better than 1, and then 1 is better than none. So if you've only got time for 1 a week, I'd still do it, because you're still going to get the benefits. Okay, you're going to get the benefits of the injury prevention, but the same things that reduce your risk of injury also improve your performance. So if you get stronger, your foot, when it's in contact within the ground, means that leg, and in particular the hip, are in a much more stable position. So the muscles that need to drive you forward are in a much better position to drive you forward. So you immediately become more efficient. Plus, if you are stronger, you can actually generate more force. So both of those two things, the stronger helps you take more force when your foot's hitting the ground, good injury prevention. It also allows you to generate more force when you press off, performance improvement. And having your hips and leg in a more stable position with less movement means that you're more efficient. So you get performance benefits and you place less strain on knees, tendons, ligaments, hips, because everything is in a better position. So those two things go hand in hand. Doing strength training improves performance and reduces injury risk. And then, as I said, the last 30 Ks of Comrades just are so much more pleasant if you've done that strength training. So we're going to aim for 2 days a week. I think 3 days a week is unrealistic for most, but I would really go as far as to say, especially now in this little building phase, is that I would go for 2, even if it means that you have to either really shorten one of your runs or drop it altogether, so that you're running 3 times a week and doing strength twice a week. And then as you get into April, if you still can't, March, somewhere around March or April, I'd get to the point where I'm either really making the time for that strength, or I would keep 1 and then go back to 4. Normally in May, I recommend that people drop one of the strength sessions so they can just recover a little bit better. But that one strength session can then maintain those strength gains that we've made up to that point. And then when in the week to do it. So typically we like a 4-day-a-week plan for the majority of the Comrades runners.
That's right.
So in a 4-day-a-week of running makes it fairly easy to then do your strength training, because you can literally pop strength training on 2 of the non-running days. And then that still gives you that rest day that I really like. So you're training 6 days a week, but running 4 days a week. If you're on a Bill Rowan plan and you're doing a 5th run in the week, then you'll probably pick your kind of easiest training day of the week to do a strength training on that day, plus one other day. And of course, if you're training for a silver medal and running 5 to 6 days a week, then you'll just do the strength training on really easy running days. And look, I've never been amazing at doing strength training, Brad, but again, just a little cautionary note from my own personal experience is that I literally had one of my longest, best running streaks in terms of just being consistent and starting to get back to where I was a couple of years ago, last year. And then towards the end of the year, I perhaps got a little bit enthusiastic with the strength, and I did a killer strength session on the Monday and then a hard session on the running session on the Tuesday, and pretty much got my first injury of the year. So you've also just got to be a little bit careful around when you're doing that. So typically we'll do our easier strength training where we'll focus more on stability and mobility, and doing some lighter strength training on the Monday, because we're coming out of a hard, long weekend. And then we want to be able to not be too sore for our hard training on a Tuesday, which is typical of Coach Parry plans. And then we'll do our harder strength session on the Wednesday or the Thursday. And then that spaces us a little bit away from the previous strength session and from the weekend. So that's how I would arrange my week.
Yeah, Lindsey, and then also just how it ties into recovery. And we spoke about recovery at the start of this podcast too, but you kind of also want to align your build weeks and recovery weeks with your strength training. You don't want to be doing hectic strength in a recovery week, for an example. And obviously those are built in on the training plans on the Coach Parry podcast, but on the Coach Parry platform. But if you're doing it on your own and you're winging it, that is something super important to bear in mind as well.
Yeah, so I would either on my recovery weeks then just chop down to the 1 strength session in the week, or do 2 much lighter sessions focusing more on mobility in the recovery week. And the same would apply coming out of race week again. So coming out of race week, I'll almost never do strength on a Monday. And then depending on how I'm feeling on a Wednesday, I would look at doing some mobility or a medium strength training session, but definitely not a hard session.
All right, fantastic. Don't forget, if you do want to get access to those strength training sessions as well as our Comrades Marathon training plans, coachparry.com is the place to head to. We'll pop the link in the description. Lindsey, again, love doing these podcasts. The feedback has been amazing. Thank you very much to Sandile for sharing the link to the last one on our Instagram stories. We're going to send that water bottle over to you. And we're back again next week. So make sure you subscribe to this podcast or whatever podcast player you are listening to. While you're at it, if you wouldn't mind leaving us a review and a rating, it does help other people find this podcast who are training for Comrades. And if you're on a WhatsApp group, or if you have a Facebook group for your running club, please do share them as well. We love to get this information in front of as many people as we possibly can so we can help them get their Comrades medal in 2025. From myself, Brad Nadelt, and the coach, Lindsey Parry, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to catching up again next week. Cheers, everyone. Bye.
Cheers.